Namaskar, welcome to Candid Conversation. Our guest for the program is Minister of State for Civil Aviation, Mr. Jayant Sinha, a well-known voice of the government on economic agenda of the government. And today we will talk to him about the civil aviation sector, also about GST and the announcement of the disinvestment of Air India. We'll start with the civil aviation sector, sir. It's been about a year now since this national civil aviation policy has been announced. And of course, it's a long-term vision for this policy. But to achieve this, regional connectivity scheme, what sort of building blocks have been put in place as of now?
Well, in the national civil aviation policy, of course, there are 5 or 6 major areas that we have emphasized. One of them is opening up our skies and making it possible for our industry to do better. A second is in terms of a whole host of passenger-centric measures that we have taken forward. One, of course, is regional connectivity, which you've alluded to, and I'll get into it in detail. We've also addressed a number of pending issues that have existed in the sector around flying overseas. There was the 520 rule, which we've amended now, made it a 20 aircraft rule. And then there have been a series of issues for cargo and ground handling that needed to be resolved, which we've also resolved as part of the national civil aviation policy. I'll also emphasize that this is the first time since independence that there is in fact a national civil aviation policy, and I think everybody in the sector will agree that it has provided a great impetus to the sector and really enabled the sector to further accelerate its growth. Now, coming to the regional connectivity scheme, which we've called UDAN.
That's right.
Ude Desh ka Aam Naagrik. And the goal there, of course, is to enable everybody to fly, to make flying truly affordable, to bring flight services, air services to tier 2, 3, 4 and smaller cities. And we've succeeded in great measure as far as regional connectivity is concerned.
These 50 airstrips that are to be remodeled or revived, 15 would be done in 17-18. 15 in 18-19 and about 20 in 19-20, and the 4,500 crores have already been allocated by the cabinet for this. Is this going to be entirely done by the Airports Authority of India, or are there other models involved?
No, there are other models involved as well, but we are well along the way to doing that. In 70 years of independence, we added 70 airports to our aviation network, so it was like an airport a year. With UDAN, in 1 year, we've added 31 new airports to the network. So we've dramatically increased the network and really enabled a number of tier 3 and tier 4 towns to get connected to the aviation map. Now, as we are doing this, we also, as you correctly pointed out, have this ability to be able to invest in 50 additional airports. And that whole process is being done in a demand-driven way. So where we find the need to invest in airports, where we find the need to strengthen the airport infrastructure, that's where we are taking advantage of the monies that have been provided in the budget, and we're using that to upgrade the airports. But that's not necessarily something we have to do for all airports. We have airports like Kanpur and Gwalior and Agra that are actually in very good shape right now, which really didn't require any investment. They simply did not have any flight services, and so with UDAN we've activated those. Other airports, on the other hand, have required some investment, and that's where we are using the money that is in the budget. But in sum total, the goal, of course, is to be able to bring as many towns, as many cities onto the aviation map as possible.
You did mention demand-driven. Now, the religious tourism circuit is very popular in our country, and in that respect, that's demand-driven. And there are trusts which have enough money to build airports. So is there a model that can utilize that as well?
Very much so, and of course we are working on that. Tirupati now has a beautiful new airport that we've just commissioned, and of course we're getting a tremendous amount of pilgrim and tourist traffic into Tirupati right now, and that's a good example. Similarly, Shirdi airport has just come up. That's an airport that's likely to get tremendous traffic as well, and that's another major pilgrimage spot. Nanded has just joined the aviation network, where of course, as you know, it's a very important center for the Sikh community. That is another pilgrimage spot that has just been activated. Apart from that, we have a number of other locations which are more in the hills, like the Char Dhams in Uttarakhand and so on. There we have to think more carefully about what we can do with respect to helicopters and other forms of transportation, smaller planes, etc. And we are working on all of that, in fact, as part of UDAN Round 2.
Airline operators, now the incentive you give them is viability gap funding. And they're supposed to start operations, in 6 months after these routes have been given to them. What are the limits to this? I mean, are there any limits to how much you can give?
We actually have a very comprehensive package that we are offering airlines. It's at 4 levels. First, what we've done is we've reduced the costs of operating in these UDAN airports, these regional airports, so that there are no airport and charges, no landing charges when they use these airports. In fact, we've gone so far as to say that when you fly from UDAN airport, so for example Gwalior, and you fly to an airport like Delhi, you don't have any airport charges in Delhi as well. So we made the costs quite affordable for these UDAN airports. That's one. Two, what we've done is that we've taken the aviation turbine fuel taxes and we've reduced them down to 3%. 2 from the center, 1% from the states. So we've brought down the cost dramatically of aviation turbine fuel. Number 3, what we've done is we've made it much more affordable to actually be able to lease smaller planes by a variety of things that we've done for the lessors, which has given them great confidence to be able to provide lower rates for the smaller aircraft that will be used for UDAN. Right. And then the 4th thing is the one that you're addressing, which is the viability gap funding. Now, as far as viability gap funding, we've enabled you to bid for the level of viability gap funding that you want, but we've capped it as well. So there is in fact a cap in terms of how much viability gap funding, how much subsidy you'll get per hour of flying, and that schedule has been established. Let me add one more point, which in fact in some ways is the most important of this package that we've assembled for airlines, and that is the exclusivity that we are offering airlines. What we're saying is, if you bid and win a route like Delhi-Kanpur, then you get that route exclusively for 3 years. That's very attractive for airlines. In fact, so attractive that in some cases people have bid 0 subsidy to be able to get the exclusivity. So between reducing the cost, making it attractive for lessors, reducing the cost of ATF and giving the exclusivity, we have enabled it that you actually in some cases can get away without having to provide any subsidy at all.
But besides all these incentives, in the long run, it has to be profitable for it to sustain. So do you see that happening? I mean, competition taking over and it becoming viable, I mean, in terms of the market?
That's a very good question. Let me first of all clarify that this economic package that we are offering, these incentives that we are offering for airlines is only for 3 years. Okay. So it goes away after 3 years. It's not as if you have the exclusivity after 3 years or you get all these costs after 3 years, because the notion is that the route will develop in 3 years. You'll have enough traffic in 3 years, and if you can't get the route in 3 years, that means the route is not viable. So that is the way we've designed it. Now, the very important thing you should recognize is that on the basis of the package that we've delivered for UDAN, Indigo, which is India's largest airline, has said that they're going to buy 50 turboprops to operate on these regional routes. SpiceJet has said that they're going to get 50 more Q400 turboprops to run on these routes, and Alliance Air, which is a subsidiary of Air India, is ordering 10-15 more turboprops as well. So because of this economic package, we have suddenly been able to bring in more than 100 planes to be able to connect up tier 3 and tier 4 towns, and that's why we believe UDAN is such a game changer for aviation in India.
Now, you did mention Alliance Air, but with the announcement of the disinvestment of Air India, what happens to Alliance Air in the UDAN scheme?
It just moves forward, because what Air India is doing right now is really focusing on its transformation. And there are a whole host of things that they're doing as part of the transformation. You must have noticed that customer service has gone up. They're handling their frequent flyer program better. They're expanding their routes. They've just opened a route to Washington. Alliance Air continues to expand. Air India Express continues to expand. And they continue to market and promote Air India quite aggressively. So Air India has embarked on a transformation plan, and of course the disinvestment is one more aspect of that transformation.
We're going to take a short break. We are talking to the Minister of State for Civil Aviation, Mr. Jayant Sinha, on Candid Conversation. When we return, we'll talk about the disinvestment of Air India. Stay with us.
दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद क्यों भाई साहब कहाँ चले कब से चिल्ला रहे हैं दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद सुनाई नहीं दे रहा इधर आइए इधर घुसिए अंदर चलिए अरे खुले में शौच जाइएगा तो बीमारी खुल के फैलेगी दरवाजा बंद तो बीमारी बंद ठीक कह रहे हैं ना शौचालय का उपयोग कीजिए और भारत को स्वच्छ बनाइए साबुन से हाथ धो लीजिएगा दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद क्यों भाई साहब कहाँ चले कब से चिल्ला रहे हैं दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद दरवाजा बंद सुनाई नहीं दे रहा इधर आइए इधर घुसिए अंदर चलिए अरे खुले में शौच जाइएगा तो बीमारी खुल के फैलेगी दरवाजा बंद तो बीमारी बंद ठीक कह रहे हैं ना शौचालय का उपयोग कीजिए और भारत को स्वच्छ बनाइए साबुन से हाथ धो लीजिएगा
Welcome back. So now, before the break, you did mention about Air India, but now that let's look at it. I mean, it has legacy issues. It's a high cost of operation. It has 50,000 crores in debt. I mean, is the government going to get a good deal in terms of disinvestment?
The people of India are going to get a great deal as we go through the process. See, you have to remember that Air India has embarked on a transformation. The transformation has been underway now for 3 years. In the first 2.5 years, we stabilized the airline. It was bleeding, it was losing a lot of money. We fixed that so that now the airline is making an operating profit, and most of the operational parameters that we track, on-time performance, utilization of planes, the overall profitability of the airline, all of these have improved quite a bit. So we've stabilized the airline. That's the first phase of the transformation. The second phase of the transformation now that we're embarked on is the balance sheet restructuring, which is reducing some of the debt burden that they have, as well as considering ownership changes as well. And that's part of the disinvestment process to see how an ownership change can assist in the transformation. As I said earlier, there are a whole host of things that we are doing already and we will continue to do as we go through the transformation process. Marketing, adding new routes, improving customer service, and so on and so forth. So all of that is part of the overall transformation of Air India, and hence through the transformation, the people of India will benefit greatly.
Now, announcements like only vegetarian meals on economy flights, some would argue that this is probably a feeble attempt to cut costs.
No, I would say that we are looking at all aspects of Air India's operations to improve. There are many things that we are doing. This is just one of them.
Reports also suggest that the disinvestment process will take place in parts. I mean, is that true? Would it happen in parts?
Well, I have explained that it is really going to be at least in 2 phases.
Okay.
Maybe even 3 or 4 phases. But the 2 phases that are very clear are, number one, we have to decide on exactly how the transaction has to move forward. And the group of ministers is looking at that, the alternative mechanism. There are 5 issues that have been identified that the alternative mechanism has to sort through. The quantum of disinvestment, the universe of bidders, what to do about subsidiaries, what to do about the debt, and so on. And so those issues are going to be first addressed, and that's phase 1. And then phase 2 is the transaction process itself. And in that phase 2, there may well be different stages. So we'll see exactly how all of that unfolds. But we are in the first phase right now, which is to understand how best to resolve these 5 issues.
Now, Air India also has tremendous assets which can be monetized. I mean, they have artworks, they have buildings, landing rights, etc. different, I suppose. But you know, it also is the national carrier, which is a brand, and it carries the head of state, head of government. You know, how is all that going to play out after it's disinvested?
The alternative mechanism, which is the ministers that are looking at this, are going to sort through all those issues. As I said, they're going to deal with the debt, they're going to deal with the subsidiaries, they're going to deal with any additional shell companies that we create. And of course, they're going to ensure that we protect all of our national interests, we protect the status of Air India as a flag carrier. All of that is going to be sorted through as part of this process.
Now, moving on to GST, does it benefit the aviation sector in general and UDAN in particular?
UDAN, of course, has a tremendous set of economic incentives that are supporting it, and GST is going to be quite neutral as far as UDAN is concerned. In fact, for the entire aviation sector, GST is going to be neutral to positive. As you know, what has happened is that we've gone from 9% in business class to 12% in business class in terms of the service taxes. And in economy, we've gone from 6% to 5%. Now, the important thing to recognize is that in business class, all of input tax credits are going to be applicable. So net, hopefully, the tax rate for business class is not going to change very much. We already have a tax rate of 5% for economy, and there will be some tax credits that will be available for that. So hopefully we'll be able to get down to a rate that's even below 5%, and that should really help the industry quite a lot in bringing down prices and making it possible for everyone to fly. And there, of course, the Honorable Prime Minister has said, which is Hawai chappal wale ko bhi Hawai jahaj pe baithayenge, and that is our entire goal, to make flying very affordable and there for the common person.
We're going to take another short break on Candid Conversation. We're talking to the Minister of State for Civil Aviation, Mr. Jayant Sinha. Stay with us.
झाड़ी के पीछे पेड़ के नीचे तालाब के आजू पटरी के बाजू करते हो तुम पेट हल्का ना शौचालय ना है नल का फैल गई गंदगी बीमारी चारों ओर अरे इसीलिए बॉस शट द डोर
मतलब
दरवाजा बंद करो दरवाजा बंद तो बीमारी बंद समझ में आई तो ही लाओ अपनी मुंडी, शौच करना है तो बंद करो भाई कुंडी। शौचालय का उपयोग कीजिए और भारत को स्वच्छ बनाइए।
Welcome back. So before the break, we just about mentioned GST. Now, speaking of GST in general, how convenient is this tax reform for all those who have to pay the tax? Because at the end of the day, you know, one of the best canons of taxation is that it has to be convenient for the person to pay.
It is very convenient, and as you know, Honorable Prime Minister has said it's a good and simple tax, which it is. Because really the people who are most involved in filing returns and so on are people that have turnover of greater than 75 lakhs, and because their turnover is greater than 75 lakhs, they typically are people that are already fully digitized, that are using computers for their bookkeeping and their accounting and so on. They already typically will have a CA or a bookkeeping clerk, etc. So for them to go from filing and dealing with 17 different taxes to dealing with just one overall tax rate is a great simplification, and it makes their life very simple. All they have to do is to continue to do everything that they're doing digitally on a computer, and then, you know, all the filings, all the returns will be much simpler. There's only one complication in this, which is what many small and medium businesses have pointed out, which is that if they do business across states, they're going to need a registration in every state, and that does take a little bit of time. But once you get onto the GST portal and you register for the different states, you get your appropriate GSTN, and then you use it as you provide services.
So the big advantage also is that it makes India a common market, but you know, I mean, if that's accepted that there are advantages to a common market, does it help all the states to develop equally or harmoniously? Does that happen with GST?
It really does help the states, because what happens now is that you can put your manufacturing and your warehousing and your logistics in the place where it makes the most sense, rather than worrying about differential tax rates and trying to optimize around tax rate. So it really streamlines the supply chain because of that, and that enables certain states, particularly the states that are more in central India and well located, to benefit from that logistics advantage. So that's number one. Number two, what it also does is it enables states that were not getting service tax revenues to now get service tax revenues as well. And so you have states like Bihar that are big consuming states, but which were not able to take benefit of, you know, the consumption that were happening in their states, but now be able to benefit from that because they're getting more in service taxes. So those are the ways in which a number of the interstate disparities that existed are going to get streamlined with GST.
Well, the overarching theme of the government's economic agenda is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. And you have said that also many times. But, you know, when all the reforms are market, you know, well, so they are market reforms. In that sense, is the trickle down taking place? I mean, the government, in a socialist setup, the government plays a role in bringing about equality. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
We are very much people first, and the Honorable Prime Minister said on his historic speech to the Central Hall of Parliament on May 20th, 2014 कि ये गरीबों की सरकार है और गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है. And so everything we have been doing has been focused on that end, which is to really work for the upliftment of the poorest. And a lot of the reforms that we're doing are really around that. So for example, people talk about monetary policy as an area where we've taken forward some very dramatic and historic reforms. But the net result of it has been that we brought down inflation. And inflation is, mehengai is the part that affects the poorest of the poor the most. So that tells you the kinds of thinking we are doing, so that what sounds very esoteric actually is an area that affects the common man. A tremendous amount of work that we've done, for example, in direct benefits transfer, in the JAM Trinity, Aadhaar, and so on, is to establish a robust social security platform so that every single person can get their government benefits, their NREGA payments, their pension payments, all of that directly into their bank account, so that they don't have to deal with middlemen, dalali, bichholi जो है उसको हम लोगों ने कम कर लिया इस तरीके से. So that is another very major thing we've done, which is directly focused on the poor. All the work we're doing in Skill India, Make in India, Startup India, all of that is intended to provide employment opportunities and skills to our young people, most of which are poor and most of which are looking to get a good start in life. So even though we've got a very aggressive reform agenda, it's very, very clearly directed and very focused on ensuring that the poorest of the poor, the ones which don't have the right opportunities, are lifted up. And of course that's true for infrastructure, that's true for Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. All these different areas are really focused on the common person.
And is it in a way, formalizing the informal sector of our country? Because
that, of course, as well. What we've done by providing banking services, by providing Mudra Yojana, obviously bringing in GST, doing demonetization, is to help the informal go from being in the shadow economy into the proper economy, the formal economy. It's very important for poor people to establish their formal credit, their formal transaction history and so on, because once they do that, then if you're a thela wala and you've been going to a bank and borrowing money from the bank and then paying your loan in a proper way, then you are in a situation where you can take, instead of a 25 or 50,000 rupee loan, you can take a 100,000 rupee loan, a 200,000 rupee loan, and that enables you to grow your business and create employment. So these are the ways in which we are bringing people out of the informal economy into the formal economy.
So let's come back to the civil aviation sector. We're already the third largest, I think, domestic market in the world.
That's right.
So with UDAN, where are we going from here?
We are the third largest, of course. We will certainly continue to grow our international market as UDAN feeds into the larger cities, which then feed into the international network. So our international market will continue to grow. Our domestic market is already the third largest in the world. What UDAN will do is further accelerate growth. We are growing at 18-20% a year, which is among the highest, if not the highest, among large aviation markets. So the growth will continue. And of course, we'll continue to follow what China and the United States have done. While we are the third largest at about 10 crore domestic passenger trips, you have to remember that China is at 40 crores and the US is at 80 crores. So we've got a long way to go before we catch up.
But what kind of employment potential does this growth offer for young people looking for careers in our country?
Yeah, no, it offers great potential. Today, the direct employment in the aviation sector is about 1.2 lakhs, 1.3 lakhs. The employment multiplier is 6x. So for every pilot that we have a whole host of people working in the airports. We have people working in a cab, bringing people to the airport, taking them out of the airport. We have people in a dhaba close to the airport that are getting employment. So the employment multiplier is 6x for direct jobs. And at the rate at which we are growing, the 1.2 lakhs is going to become 6 lakhs in the next 10-15 years. And therefore, we will, of course, generate lots and lots of indirect employment as well.
Finally, sir, the DGCA, the airlines have all been strict on unruly passengers.
Yes.
Yes, that's good. And but what about improving efficiency itself of the airlines? There have been complaints that there have been cancellations like that. The efficiency of the industry itself also is important.
We are trying very hard to improve the passenger experience. We have a whole Air Seva initiative, a Digi Yatra initiative, to be able to make customer travel, to make passenger experience as delightful and as digital as possible. So we are handling, a whole host of grievances and complaints from passengers continuously to ensure better customer service from our airlines. We've also established a whole series of guidelines as to how refunds, cancellations, delays, extra baggage should be dealt with, so that there is no scope for discretion there, and airlines have to follow very strict guidelines. And those are the ways in which we are trying to ensure that airlines improve their customer service. The reality, of course, is that we have a sector that's growing very rapidly. It's growing almost 20% a year in volume terms. And when you grow that rapidly, it obviously creates congestion, it creates stresses and strains, and so we have to work our way through that. We are rapidly adding capacity, we are rapidly dealing with all of these problems, but of course as you go at that speed, you're going to find some challenges as you go along.
One final question about fares. They are quite affordable, but the dynamic fare, changes quite rapidly, and sometimes people get upset with the kind of
there are a number of complaints that have come up about prices at the last moment being very expensive and so on. And what I've explained to people is twofold. One, that you have to pay for something, right? Which is that if you go into a 5-star hotel and have a cup of tea, it's perhaps the same cup of tea, maybe in worse than if you go into the dhaba. But because you're getting it in the hotel, you're paying more. It's the same thing when you actually get a ticket at the last moment. You're paying for the convenience of getting it at the last moment, just like you're paying for the convenience of having it in an air-conditioned, nice lobby in a 5-star hotel. So you're actually paying for something specifically. It's not as if you're getting something that is for free. You're getting the convenience of last-minute ticketing. So that's one important point. The other important point is that if we were to try and cap that fare,
okay,
then what is going to happen is that airlines are not going to be able to recoup the profits that they make from those last minute tickets that easily. They will raise the fare of all the tickets that they're selling ahead of time as well. So the average fare will also increase. So usually what happens is the vast majority of last minute fares go to business travelers, okay, who are price inelastic, who don't mind paying the higher fare. And so those people then end up subsidizing the people who are buying tickets ahead of time and buying them very cheaply. So we don't want to give those business travelers too much of a price break and raise the price for the average traveler. So those are the pricing dynamics that exist there. And so generally around the world, you'll find that this is how the fares behave. And of course, we are keeping a very close watch on that. We are making sure that the disparities are not too much and that it's within the range of how dynamic pricing is done around the world. And so far, everything that we've seen suggests that it is in fact within the range and it is within normal market behaviors. We have not seen any reason for clamping down on that.
We leave it there. Thank you very much,
Mr.
Jayant Sinha, for talking to us here on DD News.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.